Diabetes management is very important, and that's why you're here today. Isn't that the truth, huh? If you allowed yourself to forget about your blood sugars and just do whatever you want, it would be a challenge down the road, as you saw last evening. What I would like to do today in the last part of my discussion about nutrition and how diabetes plays itself out with nutrition is I want to give you a very simplistic focus on the goals that a dietitian or a nurse or a physician would use when they address the patient. Okay? You've already heard it, but we're going to look at it real simply, and this is what it is. If you're looking at goals for what a medical person would look at for each person that they see, number one on the list would be to protect them against heart disease. And this is why everyone's out there doing research, okay, on what's causing heart disease. The number two in the scenario, in the picture for reversing or keeping from the progression of complications to diabetes, and believe me, the complications are huge. When I worked in the hospital at Riverside Community Hospital, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't see a diabetic patient in the hospital. And I saw some of them pass away, and it was not a good thing. So I just am giving you encouragement today. If you feel like you're a little overwhelmed from the nutrition nuggets that I'm presenting to you, don't feel bad. Some of you are picking them up very easily, and others it's a really kind of foreign language, and that's okay. Take what you can get, and then as you progress, you'll learn more with time, okay? But I want to give you these nuggets for a reason, to help you if you have challenges with reading food labels and things like that, okay? So you have a little clue what you're looking at when you look at the food label. All right, the second item on there was healthy body weight. That's the number one, obviously, with reversing diabetes, is to bring the body weight down so that the cell can take in the insulin. Number three, to achieve and maintain a good what? Let's hear it really loud. Blood sugar. Very good. That's right on target. Y'all get an A+. So when you go home from here, don't just think that I'm on a plant foods diet, I'm fine. Okay, I've seen many patients and I know what I'm talking about. I went up to one in our church this last week and I said to him, "How are you doing?" He was on one of our programs and he looked at me and he goes, "Well, I just had surgery and I'm not sure how I'm doing." I said, "Oh, well, we need to sit down and talk." So we talked for a while. And what he began to do was check his blood sugars in the morning only and forget the rest of the day. And I thought, oh, wow, we have a little bit of a problem here. He was trying to monitor the best, you know, so he could know he's doing okay. Well, anyway, I don't want to laugh about that, but it's very true to human nature, isn't it, that we want to see the good things. I want you to be realistic with yourself and see where your areas are for needing improvement. And don't feel bad that you need improvement. Let me tell you a secret. I'm a health educator, and I do a lot of health programs. And one day, I found out I couldn't move my arm. And I got the shock of all shocks. I'll never forget this. I went into the physical therapy. They gave me physical therapy and everything. I went home, and I had this, and this all coming at me that week, and I didn't do my exercises. I was supposed to. And I thought, now I know what it means to be non-compliant. So don't be losing hope. When you go home, you may have heard 22 things to do, and you may be only doing 6 of them when you first get home. Don't feel bad. You weren't doing those 6 before you came, were you? Start to improve and keep stretching it, okay? My arm was not working at all. I began to realize that I was in trouble because I could not move my arm to here or even above my head. Now watch this. And I was just proud of this because it took me a lot of exercise to get me to be able to do this. And my arm would not go up to here. It only came right up to there. Why? Because we had a screen door that was always opening and shutting. I'd always open and shut it for our dog, which I decided I needed to sell him. He had too small of a backyard to run around. He just tearing around our backyard all the time. He needed to be out in the country. Well, anyway, my little boy also, many frequent times I'd have to change the bed at night, and I'd be in there pulling the bed up like this, the mattress. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to do. I didn't know it. I just didn't feel that bad. I just always was doing it. And then one day came. It was one day after another of that continual movement that really set me off, and my body said, no more, we're not doing this anymore. You're going to rip a rotator cuff muscle. And that's what the physical therapist shared with me. And I thought, oh, wow, I'm so glad I didn't have it ripped, because they checked it and they know it's not. So I know that if I stretch it every day and do my exercises that I improve. And I've even seen that it actually does work. So this is what I want to share with you. You may not be perfect at it, and it may not become as first nature for you to do it. But when you're at home, you need to think about your blood sugars each day, okay? How do you think about them? Well, ask yourself the question, do my blood sugars go up mostly in the evening? Check once or twice in the evening your blood sugars just to see how they're doing on the total plant diet, see? Check them when you go out and eat food at restaurants and see how you're doing. You'll be able to tell just by the blood sugars if they're staying down or not, okay? So this is really our goal, is to help your body reverse the problem, which was the type of fats in the diet, pretty much, and too much calories that would store the fat away somewhere, okay? And it cause a halting of the ability of the insulin to bring the sugar into the cells, what's happening, okay? Cool. Okay, let's move on. I want to draw your attention to just a few, just one study, just to talk about fats. We're going to talk about fats for just a little bit, and then we're going to move right into food labels, okay? A little bit about specifically how to control your blood sugar, okay, through reading labels and different things. But here I have a slide for you that talks about that first goal that medical people look at. One of the studies that they did was to look at the American Heart Association diet. Now that's similar to the American Diabetes Association diet, okay? They're trying to prevent heart disease. When they look at the American Heart Association diet, it kind of did the same thing as American Diabetes, am I saying that right? Association diet did, okay? It had very little improvement on outcome at the end. They compared that with the Ornish study. The Ornish study was very low in fat. In fact, it was 10% of the calories coming from fat. That is very strict, okay? Just so you know, 20 is nice, but 10 is pretty strict, okay? Very little fat coming in the diet, mostly high carbohydrate. And so they looked at that study. They compared different people on different diets. Now, the third one that's listed here is a high-fat Mediterranean-style diet. You probably are a little bit familiar with this because they've talked about it a lot as far as Mediterranean-style diet being healthy. And guess what? You can have a lot of fat on that diet. In fact, the amount of fat is the same as the American Heart Association. It's very similar. And I have several slides in there that I'm just going to bump over. I'm not going to show them to you right now because I want to move on, okay? But you can look those over carefully and you'll see the data that they collected. But the Mediterranean-style diet is simply this. It's a high-fat diet. And for years, the American Heart Association diet has said under 30% of your calories from fat, you know, or get lower as you can. So what's the deal? High-fat diet works to help prevent heart attacks? Yes. A very low-fat diet, 10%, helps to prevent heart attacks? Yes. But the American Heart Association diet and the American Diabetes diet don't work real well. Why? We looked at that issue of animal foods versus plant foods, and we're going to look at some other issues with fats, and that's what I want to present to you. The saturated fat that was there, the trans fatty acids that was there, the cholesterol, the dietary cholesterol that came in through the diet were the actual determining factors that would actually progress the disease along. They didn't halt it, okay? So it's really the types of fat that we find in the diet. And this is where you're going to really want to know these fats and what they're about. Because when you know what the fats are about, when you look at a food label and you read what the ingredients are, you'll begin to say, aha, now I know why this food treats my body the way it does, okay? In a nurse's health study, there was a number of nurses that were studied over time, and it showed that if they had high trans fats in their diet, that they were actually at risk for different diseases, and they were higher at risk because of the trans fats in their diet. So the risk went up, okay, due to the trans fats. What is a trans fat? Would you like to know this afternoon? You know it's hydrogenated vegetable oils. They put hydrogens on it. But let's look a little bit deeper at the fats, okay? Now the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say, out of all the foods you eat, the fat comes in a certain form. Okay? These are all forms of fat that are listed here. The first one is fatty acids. It's a long chain of carbons all hooked together. Remember how the glucose was like a round ring? Remember, this is a fatty acid. It's a really long chain of carbons. Okay? And fatty acids can be saturated or unsaturated, meaning saturated with hydrogens or unsaturated. Some places where there's no hydrogen, it has a double bond with the carbon. The carbon is always happy with 4 bonds. So if it doesn't have a hydrogen hooked on, it'll just bond with its buddy carbon next door to have 4 bonds. It's called a double bond. It has to have 4 bonds all the time to be happy. Okay, this is the fatty acids, and these fatty acids are hooked onto a glyceride molecule. It's called a triglyceride because there are 3 fatty acids hooked onto the glycerol. Now, when I talk to people about the foods that they eat, I don't know if they really recognize this or not, but all the foods you eat have one of these 3 fats right here. It's either a triglyceride, okay, which means it's a fat with 3 fatty acids hooked on. So the foods that you eat every day, the fats that you're eating are called triglycerides. You may have heard it with the blood, it's the blood triglycerides. Well, you eat fat, those triglycerides go into your body, the fatty acids break off, they go into the body, and they rehook on again and become triglycerides again and then go into the heart. So we have basically the dietary fats right in front of you here. Triglycerides, phospholipids, and a sterol. The sterol here is cholesterol. Now, I want you to note that cholesterol really is not the same as your blood cholesterol. Okay? When a doctor says, here's your total blood cholesterol, it's not necessarily talking about just the dietary cholesterol you ate. It's a big waxy molecule. But when he's talking about your blood cholesterol, he's talking about a phospholipid, okay, that has a lipoprotein, excuse me. The lipo is the fat and protein is a protein. They go together. And you'll see why in a minute. But the blood cholesterol is different from your triglycerides, from your dietary cholesterol. Okay, I just want you to note that, and then you'll see why here in a minute. If you look at the fats in general, I remember one day someone said to me, I can eat all the lecithin I want. It's not a triglyceride. I looked at him and I go, well, actually, lecithin comes from soybeans, and it's very high fat. It is fat. And all fats have 9 calories per gram. Okay? So that's pretty clear. Now, one thing you need to note, though, is that cholesterol down here, the sterol, so really, the sterol is the only one in there that doesn't have any calories. Why? Because it's a cholesterol molecule that's so big it never gets taken apart. Okay? It's not ever broken up in the body. It's just a cholesterol molecule. It floats around. That's what we eat. Like if you have milk or meat, the cholesterol that comes in through that source, that is dietary cholesterol. It comes right in the body and is used in the body. Your body makes cholesterol, that big waxy substance, because it is used in the body in a healthy way. Now, if you think about fats, what 2 fats on there contribute to your calories? Triglycerides is number 1. It's huge. All the fats that come in are usually triglycerides, with the exception of a few phospholipids. Okay? So most of your dietary fat we're talking about is triglycerides. Remember, the triglyceride is, there we go, the triglyceride is simply a glycerol molecule with fatty acids hooked onto it. So what I'm going to do with you right now is I'm going to take a little look at what these fatty acids are that are hooked on, okay? So when you have a dietary intake of fat, it will be a triglyceride. You got that much? And if it's not, it's a phospholipid. We'll talk about that later. So here you have the picture of 4 different, what? Fatty acids, okay? The 4 different fatty acids represented here are easy to identify by what? The double bond that they created, okay? If you look, I got this pointer here, this will help me a lot for you. Let's look at A up here. Oops. Oh well. If I knew how to turn it on, I would. Let's see. It's definitely not on. Hang on. Oh, there we go. Okay, here's A right here. Now this is a fatty acid. How do I know that? It's got lots of carbons and they're all in a long line. Okay, that's easy to see. Now, the way you tell what kind of fat it is, what kind of fatty acid, is you look at it and you say, is it completely saturated with hydrogens? Every single one of these carbons has 4 bonds. 1, see there's 1 bond. 2, 3, 4, right? This one's satisfied too. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's satisfied, okay? Over here, if you look down here, there's no double bonds the whole way. And just so you know, you don't have to know this, but this is what we know. 18 of these carbons hooked together is animal fat from meat, okay? This is called stearic acid because automatically it's got 18 carbons. If you took a saturated fat, which is what this is, a saturated fatty acid, and you have 18 carbons on it by nature, it automatically comes from the animal food kingdom. It's a saturated fat from meat, period. How's that? Okay? That's how you identify it. Now, if you take the same saturated fat and knock off these last two, and you hook this acid group over here somewhere, you would have a fatty acid that's now 16 carbons long. Okay? And they would call that a coconut oil. It's saturated fat, but it's a different kind of saturated fat. I want you to know, right, this little plug I'm going to plug in here. Coconut is not the same as animal fats. It doesn't function the same in the body, okay? So if you hear people say coconut oil is really high in saturated fat, they are absolutely right. It's the highest of any food on the planet that's highest in saturated fat. But it has 16 carbons, not 18. It does have a different nature about it, okay? We don't know what that nature is, but we eat it in limited amounts, and it's not really a destructive problem, okay? So just so you know. That's the one exception to the rule as far as saturated fats go. All right, now you come down to B. Can someone guess for me what this fatty acid is? You don't have to guess the name, but what, is it saturated or unsaturated?
Unsaturated.
Good. Here is a double bond. And remember the rule, carbon must have 4 bonds. It has one here, one there, and it's missing a hydrogen. And this one next to it's missing a hydrogen. They're hooking themselves together in a double bond. And those bonds, the attractions that they have to each other are kind of, no, they're weak, actually. A double bond is weaker than a single bond, okay? And it has to do with electrons buzzing around the outside, and there's just so much confusion they want to separate off, okay? That's why that's weaker bond. I won't get into all that, that's too much. What I do want to show you from this is a mono unsaturated fatty acid. And this one says omega-9. Now, I'm not going to try and have you learn all this, okay? So I'm just going to show you what it did. They counted from this end 9 carbons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's the 9. Omega-3 means from the omega end, they count how many carbons in, and that's where the double bond is found on this fatty acid. So we call it omega-9. You've heard of omega-3, right? Let's look at omega-3. It's right down here on D. 1, 2, 3. There's the double bond. And actually, there's more double bonds. So we call this a polyunsaturated fatty acid. Now I'm done, okay? That's as much as I'm going to go. I don't want to wipe you out. Chemistry is chemistry. You can't really do a whole lot to make it easy. But that's what I wanted to show you, is what was going on with fatty acids, okay? Now I'm going to move on. This is a picture of a double bond right here that's called a cis form. Why is it cis? Sisters are in the same family. Sisters, like on the same side maybe of the molecule. They found the hydrogen showing up on the same side of the molecule. That's a double bond. It's called a unsaturated fatty acid. It has a double bond. The double bond shows up on one side. That's a cis form. This is the way all of the natural fats occur. When you hydrogenate a natural fat, you immediately change how the form of the fat comes. This is known as a trans fatty acid right here. Okay? Now watch this. This molecule is very happy as it is with this bend in it. You see how it's got a bend like your elbow? Why? Because these bonds, these little hydrogens, 2 of them on the same side, are taking up a lot of space, and it makes the carbon go farther away on this side here. It doesn't like it if it's too close, so it sends it away. It's got an attraction or an affinity or whatever you call it. And it makes it have a kink, if you will, in it. All right? Now, why is all this important? I'm going to tell you right now. This is the most powerful thing you ever heard, probably. This right here is a trans fat. It doesn't have a kink in it anymore. When we hydrogenate a fat, when it's, you get it to be solid at room temperature and hydrogenate it, it changes its structure to the point where it's straight. Now watch this. If I have so many people in the room lined up from that wall to that wall, and stack the people up one after another right next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, all the way across the room, if you were insulin, would you be able to get through? Not very well. If you have a little bit of give and take, the insulin kind of squeezes through. So straightness, all of the fats in the membrane of the cell, if they're all straight and stiff, they don't let the insulin hook on very well. They don't let the doors come in to allow the sugar in the cell. Okay? So what we're talking about here is the nature of the fat. If it's stiff and straight, which is saturated fat and trans fats, they keep the sugar out of the cell, and it's called insulin resistance. Did you catch that part of it? Okay. All right, let's go on. This is a triglyceride, one way to look at it. I just put little blurbs on the end to represent the fatty acids. So what is it that's happening here? You can hook a green fatty acid on, which may be, let's say it's saturated fat. And you can hook two unsaturated fats on that are blue. Now what do you have? Well, in the diet, if you look at all the triglycerides that are found in the diet, you will note that not one triglyceride is without saturated fat in it. Did you catch on? Depending on which fatty acids hook onto that glycerol, you could have two saturated fats hooked onto the glycerol and one mono unsaturated. Or you could have one mono and two polyunsaturated hooked onto that glycerol. And you change the profile of the fat, whether it's high in one fat versus another. Okay, so let's see now, if you look at, here's beef. Here's beef fat right here. How much is saturated? Let's see, saturated's right here. It's the purple. It's the first one. So here's beef. See how much is saturated in beef fat? It's not very much, is it? Compared to coconut oil, look at this. So we're really not talking so much about how much. We're talking about what kind. Okay, that's what we're really talking about. And when you talk about saturated fats, we're making it easy on you. Just stay away from saturated fats. It's so easy that way, okay? You will have some saturated fat coming in your diet. Now, when you go to look at your food label, it'll say 1.5 grams of saturated fat on it. And you thought, I'm supposed to stay away from saturated fat. What's that doing on the label? Actually, there's a little bit of saturated fat in all foods, okay? So you know not to worry about that part of it, okay? All right, let's go on. And here is a phospholipid. Do you know what soap does? When you take a bath, you get the soap and you scrub maybe. That soap picks up the dirt, doesn't it? It loves dirt and picks it up and attracts it to itself. Well, if you will, on this fatty acid, the two fatty acids that are sitting there love fat. Have you ever tried to mix fat and water? They don't mix very well, do they? Okay? Now watch this incredible thing. If your blood is mostly water, how are you going to get your fat going through the blood? The fat doesn't like water. It won't go through the blood very well. So we put on something on the end of this other fat that's called a phosphate group. It has a little nitrogen in it, but it's really a phosphate group. We call these phospholipids. One end of it loves water, the phospholipid end, and one loves fat. Now let's talk about blood cholesterol, because now we're in the category where you can understand what's happening with cholesterol. Okay, here we have the 4 different kinds of blood cholesterol. When you go to the doctor and they say, what's your LDL level? That's your, quote, bad cholesterol, right? What's your HDL level? That's your good cholesterol. Let's look a little deeper and see what's going on. Remember I talked about how your fats come in your diet? Triglycerides mainly, and a few phospholipids. Well, your body has packages, and the way it packages those fats is very important. If you want to take the fat from your food and put it into your bloodstream, you've got to have a package, because fat does not like water, and that's what your blood is mostly. Okay? So the package that it gets is a lipoprotein. The The lipid part loves fat. The protein part helps. And when you look at it, it really is interesting because I can put fat inside of a phospholipid, because remember, one end of the phospholipid likes me and the other end likes water, so it stays in the blood easy. This is the package that we're putting together. So here we go, here we go. Hang on with me, I'm just about at the end of this, okay? I'm going to take in a bite of food, and I have, let's say, 10 grams of fat in it. And those 10 grams of fat are triglycerides. Remember the glycerol with 3 fatty acids hooked on? When your body enzymes try to digest it, bile is there, breaks it apart. It goes through the intestine walls, and it does not go straight to the liver like sugar and protein do when it's digested. It goes and dumps right into the heart, believe it or not. Okay? And when it dumps into the heart, it better be protective. And so it's in what's called a chylomicron molecule. As all that triglycerides in your meal goes into a chylomicron. Now the chylomicron goes on its merry way through your bloodstream and says, here, you can have some triglycerides for your cells to function. Here, you can have some cholesterol. Pretty soon that chylomicron turns immediately into an LDL. It's got rid of some of its fats, okay? It has predominantly now cholesterol left inside of it, okay? Now follow me carefully. Chylomicron turns into an LDL turns into a VLDL, and then it turns into an HDL. Why is that true? All right. HDL is called high-density lipoprotein. If you have a high density of something, you're really heavy, where do you go? If you're in a pool, right? To the bottom. So HDLs are very light in fat. They have very little fat in them, see? That's why they're considered good things. They take whatever's out there in the periphery of your tissue, and if you have excess, the HDL picks it up, takes it back to the liver, and dumps it off, okay? Your VLDL is kind of in between. The VLDL goes from the liver out to the periphery, or it moves around from there to the liver. But when you have a high LDL, it means something. It means your total triglycerides are usually kind of high, and your cholesterol is in there. And those are the things that we say are bad when they start getting in the way and making plaque, right? You see how that connects? Okay. So here's what we're going to do here. We're going to say to ourselves, if I want to get a really good LDL, I'm going to eat less of those fats that cause my LDL to stay high. I want to eat the fats that cause it to be low. And those are the ones that cause the LDL to be high are saturated fat and trans fats. Okay, so this is what it's all about. And this is why the doctors are looking at your blood cholesterol to see what's going on. All right, let's change gears. That was quite a lot, I know. But I'm going to change gears now and talk about the last little bit of detail in terms of how to prevent heart disease. This is a book I found at the bookstore, Barnes & Noble, or wherever you go, you can find this book. It says, a runaway bestseller. It's called Superfoods. And what it's really all about is the phytochemicals in the diet and where are they found, okay? And you look in this guide, and it's interesting. There are phytochemicals in almost every plant food out there. It's really quite remarkable. The soybean has genistein and daisine. Those are very powerful in stopping tumors from growing and cancer. Okay? What they do is they kind of close off the blood supply to the cancer so it can't grow anymore. That's what that phytochemical does. They've proven that. So soybeans are healthy for you as long as you can eat soybeans, if you're not allergic to them or something. Walnuts have omega-3 fatty acids. They know that that is helpful in keeping the essential fatty acids in your body under control. I would like to say something here for just a minute. When you heard the talk that Dr. Arnott gave, the impression might have been left that you really don't want to eat anything with fat in it, maybe 1 tablespoon a day. Did you get that impression a little bit? Yeah. Or did you find him a little more? The impression with no added oil. Thank you, yes, okay. Now I'm not going to disagree with that because I really agree with what he was saying. When you're a diabetic, your sugars are out of control, you want to get that energy out of your body. Well, how do you do it? You lose weight, and that's one way to do it is fat. Decrease the fat in the diet. That's the bottom line, okay? That's what he was doing, actually, giving you a good diet goal, okay? But we also have to remember something very important here that people don't always catch. This is not something people realize or know. But all of the phytochemicals that are found in all the plant foods are not digested by themselves. They must have fat to carry them across that barrier into your body. Did you know that? So we need fat in order to digest the things that are protective for us against heart disease. This is why it's important to include some fats in the diet and not leave them out altogether. Okay? You want to leave them out to the point where you're getting your weight loss happening, but not so much that you're not getting your protection from the foods you eat. Okay? So there's going to be a lot of categories that you may wonder, what's going on here? I'm going to present to you today a plant-based exchange diet that you can follow just simple. This is the serving number I need, and I'm on my way for the day, okay? You don't have to worry about figuring out calories. You don't have to worry about figuring out how much fat grams I'm getting and all this kind of stuff. But I'm going to take you through that step so that you can do it if you need to. But your simple, basic diet is going to look like the number of servings from each of the food groups from the plant kingdom. If you'll look at your handout right now, I think that that's a good time to just help you see what direction we're heading here. Let's see, where did it go? Here it is. This is what it looks like. Okay, do you have this? Plant products and exchanges. Okay. Section number 3, it's about in the middle towards the 3/4 point in the handouts. It's actually a full page. I didn't want to shrink it down at all because this is a really important document for me anyway. If you go to any dietitian and you want them to help you with your diet, you simply hand this to them and they'll almost know what to do, okay? As dietitian is looking at exchange lists all the time with diabetics because we want to know how many carbohydrates are coming in to see that blood sugar controlled, okay? So this gives an idea how many servings from each of the food groups so that they can actually see what the exchanges are and they can help you. Okay, let's go on here. We had number 2 goal. Instead of the first one we've been talking about as heart disease prevention, we look at weight loss and weight, healthy weights. I just want to breeze over this stuff because this stuff Doug Plata did very well in covering it with you, okay? I'm going to just show you a chart that I put in your handout that you can look at. It's a little bit easier to follow because it has the numbers in there and it gives you the BMI number, okay? But he gave you a chart that just says healthy, overweight and obese, something like that, okay? So this has actual numbers inside of it if that helps you. I know several people asked that question, so I thought I'd draw your attention to that. But let's go on. How many calories does it take for your body to burn to lose 1 pound of fat? Anybody that's dieted for any length of time probably knows these numbers pretty well. 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of body fat, okay? So we know this as a fact. It's not going to change tomorrow, okay? Or yesterday or the day before, all right? So the fact is 1 pound of body fat equals 3,500 calories. This helps us tremendously with understanding how you're doing with your weight loss. If you go on this plant-based diet and you're at home, you find yourself losing, let's say you weigh yourself once a week, and you find yourself losing 4 or 5 pounds. If you're significantly above your ideal weight, as in obesity category, it's probably not a problem to lose up to 5 pounds a week, okay? But I caution you, don't keep trying to lose 5 pounds a week repetitive times, because if you lose that weight and you don't keep it off, you could gain more a little bit later and have to lose more again, gain weight. It's actually not as healthy as if you just changed your lifestyle, ate well, tried to keep your weight down and lose a little bit at a time. That's the best approach. And they found that to be true because gallbladder disease is very high on in our hospitals. One of the people in our church recently had to be in the hospital, had their gallbladder removed. What they're finding out is a rapid turnover of fat in the body. Quick weight loss is what we're talking about, more than 3 pounds a week, tends to lead towards gallstone formations. Okay, so there's issues behind this. That's why I want to be careful that you're not necessarily just jumping into a 10% fat diet. You may want it a little higher, like 20 is adequate, okay, and not be too low, all right? Okay. Let's look at the blood sugar issue, and we're looking at glycemic index. You may not be aware of this, but The real issue with the glycemic index number isn't so much as how high it rises and then drops, or how slowly it rises and how long it goes at that height. Because that kind of food, as opposed to the first one I showed you with a spike, can have the same index number. Can you believe that? A very quick rise and a quick drop can have the same index number for glycemic index as a slow rise, but it's a long time that it's been up. So what does that tell us? It tells us a little bit about how much carbohydrate's coming in, right, at the meal, as well as not just the type. So when we go on here and we're looking at how to control blood sugar, it's important to know what factors affect the glycemic index. Okay, so number one on the list, and don't forget this one, this is the one I highlighted in blue because this is more important than any of the other factors on the list, okay? How many grams of carbohydrate you eat at a meal makes a huge difference, no matter what kind of carbohydrate it is, except for the exclusion of fiber, right? Is everybody, that sinking in okay with everybody? So, if I look on a food label, like this food label, and I ask myself the question, is this a good food for a diabetic or not? As far as the blood sugar control issue, I look at the total carbohydrates, and then I say to myself, how much of that is fiber? I'm going to subtract that away. Here's a 5-gram total carbohydrate minus 2 grams of fiber. So what's that equal? Let's see. 3, thank you. 3 grams of fiber, as opposed to a, what's that? Fiber, thank you, carbohydrate. As opposed to an item that has, let's say, 30 to 40 grams of carbohydrate. Which one would, even if this were a high glycemic index, which one would be the worst? This is, by the way, very low. Okay, so you have a high rise or a long, forever rise. We're talking about too many calories in your diet. That's what I'm really trying to say. So you can have the same effect with overeating, is the idea. This is why I'm introducing you to the exchange list. If you pick on your food exchange list here the number of servings from each group and put them into your 3 meals in the day, you have it made because you're not going to overdo on the carbohydrate calories. It's a whole lot easier to do this than to count them all the time. Okay? That's what the exchange list is for, to make sure you're getting your carbohydrates spread out through the day. Yes?
I guess you'll ask me on what are we deducting, what are we subtracting, what's the final answer, what's that?
Oh, okay. We were just looking at total grams of carbohydrate, and when you look on a label, it's listed as total carbohydrate, but you got to remember fiber doesn't have calories. So we're going to subtract that fiber away so we don't account for those grams. They don't have any calories to affect our blood sugar at all. Okay? So we were going to subtract that out.
Okay, and then so what is your, the remainder is?
The remainder is really how many carbohydrates you have that are going to give you calories, yeah. So you don't want to overdo on the total number of grams in that one meal. Okay? Number 2 on the list is the type of sugar. We talked about that already. Or did we? Let's see. The higher one is glucose and the lower one is fructose. Now what kind of, remember he talked about the fruits from Washington and Oregon are better in glycemic. Why? They're high in fructose. Their fruit sugar is very high. Okay, that's why. Then we'll go on. Kind of starch. We talked about potatoes. Potatoes are very high in amylopectin. Many, many, many glucoses all hooked on all these branches. There's more surface area. So let me just say it this way, there's more glucoses on the surface, and you, as an enzyme in the body, can take them off real fast. So you have a quick rise in your sugars as opposed to a straight line of sugars. And you just take one sugar off at a time. You can't reach all these sugars in the middle, but on a branch chain, you can reach a lot of sugars all at once, say with enzymes, and take them off quickly. Okay? All right. Then number 4, amount and type of fiber. You know, I kind of want to say something here. I've been wanting to wait till the end, but I'm going to say it now because it somehow makes a better point, I think. You know, people give rice a bad rap. You know how it's low on, higher on the glycemic index. But really, if you looked at all the different kinds of rices, not all rices are the same. If you get a basmati rice, I pulled these right out of my cupboard, but I don't think I have it with me. I don't. Okay. This is just an example of how I store my grains in my own house. I just pulled them out of the cupboard and brought them here to show you. But if you get a rice that's a long grain and basmati and brown rice. That's the best on the glycemic index, okay? It's not like the other ones. So there are differences even in plant foods that are there, okay? Number 4 is having fiber in it obviously slows down the absorption like we talked about in terms of an apple. With the soluble fiber of pectin in the apple, it gums up and holds the sugar longer so it doesn't go into your bloodstream right away. It goes in slower. All right, and the form the food comes in, this is a real tricky one. I don't want to spend much time on this one, but this is a very tricky one, okay? If you put, food, I don't want to deal with it. It's a very difficult one. If you're a dietitian, you can figure it out, but if you're not, it's a little tricky, okay? So I'm not going to worry about it. But bottom line is, if you have a rolled oats, you know, like quick oats, rolled oats, those have been chopped up, right? And there's more surface area to take that sugar off, just like we talked about with the amylopectin, you know? Well, with the whole oat groats, they're sliced in half and that's it. You have a whole groat. Less of it comes off at once. So you have a slower rise in your blood sugars. So this would be a good choice. It's called steel cut oats. They just steel cut that oat into 4 pieces or whatever, and that's it. It's not like a rolled oat, but it works very nicely for a diabetic breakfast. Okay? That's another way of looking at that. So the current diabetic exchange list that we use in the hospital, I guess I put it somewhere else. It's kind of a green little thing, and if you've been there, you know what it looks like. It kind of doesn't really do justice for someone who's trying to eat a plant-based diet. So I created a new one so that you will be happy, hopefully, with being able to control your sugars if you're having a challenge at home with it, even after you've gone onto a plant food diet. Okay? Check that blood sugar in the evening. Is it rising too high? Maybe you need to think a little bit about using the exchange list for a little while in transition. Till your body gets rid of some of the insulin resistance. Starts using the sugar well again, maybe you could just throw that exchange list out the door and not have to use it. But if you need it, that's what it's for, okay? Using the number of servings from each of the food groups. Okay, so again, simple whole foods on the right, the phytochemicals, antioxidants like vitamin A, vitamin E, very powerful antioxidants, but did you know you have to have fat in the diet to get them to absorb into your body? So we're going to look at some of these issues now. I think I'm almost running way behind here, so let me see what I can do. Here is the actual exchange list. 6 to 11 servings per day from the grain group. And remember, the starchy vegetables have a lot of calories, so we include them with the grains choice. Okay? And we have vegetables at 4 or more. That's the vegetables that grow above ground, remember? Not as many calories. And then legumes, look at that, 4 to 6. You know what I do with that list? I take and make myself have 2 servings of soy milk a day from that list, and it takes up some of that legume servings, okay? Because that's kind of a high number when you think about it. So you look at it that way, it sure cuts it down in a hurry, and you've improved your diet just like that. Okay, let's go on here. You have that in your handouts. These on the right are all optional, so I just took them off. But if you're eating out and something comes in front of you, you're not sure what to do with it, and you're not real sure, this is what this is for, is to help you see how it fits in your diet for that day. All right. Now, not all of you are going to be consuming the same number of calories in your day. So you kind of have to sit down and say, what number of calories should I be getting? Well, if you start out with a 2,000 calorie diet, or 2,100 as it shows here in the higher end, you would have that number of servings from each of the food groups. That's how an exchange list works. It controls the number of calories that are coming in, okay? It controls the amount of carbohydrates that are coming in. So you want to think about it in that way. Now watch the carbohydrates in this meal. If you take an exchange from a grain or a starchy vegetable, everybody in the exchange world knows that 1 grain serving or 1 starchy vegetable serving equals 15 grams of carbohydrates, no matter what you do. Okay, so you always have that number. And then legumes are always going to be 12 grams if you have 1 serving of a legume. And there's a handout that has the serving sizes on it. Okay, then you go down to fruit, it will always be 15. Okay, so that makes it very simple. let's forget the food guide pyramid for a minute and not even use the exchange list and say to yourself, how many food items are on my plate at this one meal? If you can keep your carbohydrate food choices to 3 or 4, you're doing very well. Don't go over that and you're fine. Try to get more foods that are protein or fat oriented in that meal, okay? Now, let's see, I'm going to skip over that. That's information that's in your handout we can look at together later. We're going to just close here with a few items from the reading a food label. Here is the Nutrition Facts food label, and they changed this a number of years ago. And to be honest with you, I don't remember the exact number of years ago it was. It's a little while now. But they all say Nutrition Facts on the top of each label. If you find that Nutrition Facts label, underneath it gives you the calories that are in that food per serving. Okay, so if I take a food item off the shelf and I'm looking at it, on the very top you'll see serving size. And this is a milk, supposedly a milk product. It will always have 8 ounces as the serving size. Why? Because every milk product by law must have the serving size the same. It's always 8 ounces, which is 1 cup. Now you can compare labels. You used to not be able to do that. Okay? You can see which is better in fat, which is better in carbohydrate, which is better in protein. Okay? That's one good thing about having the serving sizes be the same amongst types of foods. Then we look down and see the total fats, grams. You can see there's total fat grams, and then they break it down more to say how many saturated fat, how many trans fats are in this food. What's really exciting is that they just got trans fats on the label. It didn't used to be there. Now you have to say whether you have trans fats or not in this food. That's exciting. You guys are lucky. When I was a dietitian a while ago, we had to figure it out for everybody. It wasn't very easy, actually. Okay, so we're looking again at the serving. You see how much is coming in, and then you look at the part under it is all about the number of calories in the serving, but then separate the calories from the grams of the different nutrients that are there, okay? So we see fat grams there, carbohydrates there. Now remember we were talking about subtracting the fat, subtracting the fiber from the total carbohydrates so you can find out how many are the calories. Here you have 11 grams of total carbohydrate. Subtract that 1 gram off and what do you get? 10, right. Okay, so you're going to have 10 grams that you're working with for your calories in this item. So it would be true because it's 5 grams from simple sugars and 5 grams from the other carbohydrates that are there.
So what's the other carbohydrate about?
Oh, okay.
Can you add that to the total carbohydrate?
Okay, watch this. The total carbohydrate at the top represents every carbohydrate. So you got simple, you've got complex at the bottom where it says other carbs at the bottom. They usually don't even list that on the label. Okay, I picked this one out because of that reason. And then up above it, it's the fiber. So fiber, sugar, and complex carbohydrate, which are the starches, right?
Yeah.
All 3 of those together make a total carbohydrate. Yeah, but not all of them have calories. Fiber doesn't have calories. Okay, thank you for asking that. Okay. All right, let's move on. Grams of protein are there. Now I want you to notice the soy milk that's listed here, how many grams are there? 7. If you look at rice milk, do you know how many grams rice milk has?
4.5.
1. It's very unusual, but 1 gram of protein for 1 serving, whereas the soy-based milks have 7 grams. I only bring this up because a lot of people don't realize that if you're on a vegan diet and you're low on protein, let's say you have a child that's growing. They need enough calories and enough protein to keep themselves going. We don't want them on a low-fat diet as a child, okay, because they need more fat. So we try to think about not giving them rice milk every day as their standard soy milk substitute or whatever, unless they're allergic to soy. That's a different issue, okay, and then they get their protein in a different way. I'm just kind of giving you highlights here. I don't know if, hopefully it's helpful. All right, again, we just looked at a food label. On the top, right here is what we were looking at, okay? Do you recognize this? Yeah. Everybody's probably seen this pretty easily. Now we're going to look right here for just a second, and I just want to look at it for a few seconds. Right here tells us the amount of nutrients We've been talking about carbohydrates, fats, and protein, haven't we? But we really haven't talked much about the vitamins and minerals. Well, they're listed right here. The ones that are mandatory are calcium, iron, vitamin A, and vitamin C. Why? Anybody want to guess? On a typical American diet, those are the ones that everybody's lowest on. But when you change to a total plant product diet, you're not in that category anymore. When I worked at Weimar, we did all these students, and they did all of their diet recalls and figured out how much they were getting of this and that. Every one of them, not a single one deficient in vitamin C or vitamin A. Wonderful. As a dietitian, it's hard to find that when you're on a plant product diet. It isn't. Okay? So you have plenty of vitamin A, plenty of vitamin C, plenty of calcium for what you need here. And we can bring this calcium topic up again at the panel discussion, okay, because I've run out of time here. So that's basically that. Let me finish up. Whoops, what did I do? We're at the end, right? Just there we go. And this bottom part is just facts. You might get confused and wonder what they're doing, but they're trying to help you. Up here it says percent daily values are based on 2,000 calorie diet. Your daily value may be higher or lower depending on your calorie need. Remember how one person is really active, they may need more calories in a day than someone that's not as active. So you're looking at this percent values as a DV, percent daily value. If you are talking about a vitamin or a mineral, they're based on all the old RDAs. You remember what an RDA is? The recommended dietary allowance, okay? And you don't have to get that dietary allowance every day, especially if it's vitamin A. You can get it over time because vitamin A is fat soluble and it sticks around in your body for a while. It's not a problem, see? So there's certain things that are kind of interesting. But let me just suggest here that this is talking about total fat here, and it says less than 65 grams of total fat is the guideline for a healthy person if they're getting 2,000 calories in their diet a day. If they're getting 2,500 calories in their diet, then that total fat goes up a little bit, but it's the same percentage, okay, out of the calorie number. Okay. And I'm going to move on because there's some things that I have on here. You can look at the handouts if you need more info on it. This is a little confusing here. Look at all that. It makes you wonder, what am I supposed to look at first? Let me steer you through it a little bit. If you look on the top, serving size is still there, right? But they added something, children under 4. This is Cheerios, by the way, and Cheerios is the #1 food on the WIC program for children. And so here you have Cheerios company, whatever that company is, putting on here children under 4. The serving size is 3/4 of a cup. That makes sense. Children are smaller, okay? So they need a little less than a serving size. Servings per container, about 14. Children under 4, about 19 container servings. Okay, let's jump down. Now here is a column that goes up and down like this. This is all together, okay? And it goes under this right here, Cheerios. That's your typical column that you would look at. But if you move over one, it says here, here's Cheerios with a half a cup of skim milk. So it goes up, changes. Here's cereal for children that are under 4. Remember that 3/4 of a cup serving? That's for children and their RDAs right here. It's not for an adult RDA. So you see how it's changed? You kind of have to know how to read these labels to understand them. There are very few of these where they've mixed up all kinds of stuff on them, but that's what's going on, okay? Very few of those. There's more of the other ones that are simple. You just look over there and find it, okay? All right. Let's take a second to talk about vitamin C. It's known that the old RDAs require 60 milligrams. And if you look on the label here, your need for the whole day is how many? 60 of vitamin C. Now watch what they do. Here is vitamin C, and how much does it say is coming in for the daily value? 10% of that 60 milligrams. Okay, this is how it works. 10% of what you need. So what would that be? 10% of 60 is 6, right? Milligrams. That's what's in this Cheerios in 1 cup serving for vitamin C. That's how it works, okay? I just wanted you to see that in a nutshell. Okay, let's see. we're looking here at the total calories on a label. I'll just step you through that quickly. Fat grams were how many on that serving? I'm not going to worry about that. Just look for the fat grams and see how many there are. Total fat grams will be a number. Times it by how many calories per gram, and you get the number of calories coming from fat. Then do the same thing with carbohydrate. Find that carbohydrate number, which is the total carbs minus the fiber carbs, and times it by 4, and you get the number of calories coming from carbohydrate. Then you take the protein, and you times it by 4, because every gram of protein that's in there has 4 kcals with it. So you times it and you get that number. Then you add all these together, and what do you have? Can somebody tell me what I have at the end here when you add them all together? The total number of calories coming from that food in that serving size. Okay? So you have a total number here. Fat plus carbs plus protein gives you the total number of calories in that food you just ate for that serving. Okay? If you're going to be on the plant-based diet, the exchange list I gave you keeps you to the 20 to 25% fat intake, just so you know where that exchange list is. Okay? That's where it's at. And there's ways of figuring it out, and it's all in your handouts, and I can go over that with you individually if you'd like me to. Just let me know. There are 56 grams when you figure it out per day on a 2,000 calorie diet. After you figured it all out, if you have need of 2,000 calories in one day, if you keep your fat grams to about 56 or less, what is that giving you? Somewhere between 20 and 25% of your calories coming from fat, which is a good goal. It's really good. It's right on. Okay? And how do I get that? By following the exchange list. How many servings per day from each of your food groups? Okay. And here's a little chart that I just thought I'd throw in there for you so that you can actually write it all down. Here's what I ate at this meal, and how many grams of fat, how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbs. You can figure all that out because all the details are in your handouts, which I haven't shown you today, just so you know. A lot of handouts there that are not up here that you'll be able to figure it out. Okay? Okay, that's it.
Time for supplements.
Are there any questions? Okay.